renewed commitment towards executive-legislature relationship, President Buhari meets with Deputy Senate President.
National Assembly pledges adequate budgetary provision for security and the development of areas affected by banditry.
Wives of Nigerian governors collaborate on project to reverse the cancer statistics.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on immigrant e-registration and expatriate quota abuse.
Kingsley, migration of people is usually inevitable and could be adduced to many reasons, as it is characteristics of living beings and organisms to move from one place to the other. So if your migration from this moment is towards the Federal Republic of Nigeria, then you should consider this information.
That's right, Jumai. Now, migration and enumeration listing isn't new to governments. And so last week, on behalf of the government of the Federal Republic, the Secretary to the government of the Federation flagged off a new migrant e-registration exercise for the agencies saddled with the task.
And this, amongst other goals, the federal government believes will aid internal monitoring and enhance security, as the registration exercise and data processing centers across the country will be facilitating the documentation of migrants living in Nigeria.
So if you're going to be spending beyond 90 days in Nigeria, or peradventure you have exceeded your stay as an immigrant, now there is a 6-month amnesty window for you to come forward and get documented in the current exercise, as failure to comply within the stipulated period will earn such a person or such individuals the status of an illegal immigrant.
So, Kingsley, the questions are, what are the guidelines in this exercise? How reassuring will this be in the protection of the rights of migrants? What other modalities will be employed in the reform towards enhancing the nation's identity management?
That's right. Pertinent questions you have raised there, Jumai. And just as the government is throwing its weight behind the status regulation and documentation, there is indeed another worry for Nigerians on yet another kind of migration. And this has to do with expatriate quota distribution and abuse.
Yes, Kingsley, and the concern here is there are alleged breaches as to the adherence to the provision of the Act. So what is the level of compliance by these companies?
And how is, of course, this being monitored by the appropriate agencies? These are some of the talking points we have on the program today. And on that note, we'd like to welcome you to today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Jumma Yusuf. It's always good to have you join us on the program. On the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, we're broadcasting live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital city. As always, we will bring you the complimentary part to the program. This includes newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment news. In the meantime, here's the news highlights with Ifoma Ojinta. Good morning, Ifoma. Good to see you.
Good morning, Jumma. Good to see you, and good to see you too, Kingsley.
Thank you.
Here is the morning news. President Muhammadu Buhari has granted audience to the Deputy President of the Senate, Ovie Omoagege, in furtherance of the renewed commitment by both the executive and the legislature to effectively work in harmony for peace and prosperity of the country.
The President has provided everything that ought to be given to them, everything in terms of funding they've received, in terms of acquisition of weaponry that has been provided for them. It's now left for them to justify the positions they hold.
President of the Senate, Ahmed Lawal, says South African government must account for all Nigerians killed in its jurisdiction. Senator Lawal was speaking during a meeting with the South African Acting High Commissioner to Nigeria, Bobby Monroe.
We are not going to take this anymore. Any Nigerian killed must be accounted for. We are going to write the names of all Nigerians killed in South Africa, 118, from the time the first killing started to the last.
The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, says the National Assembly will ensure adequate budgetary provision for the development of areas affected by banditry and other forms of criminality in Zamfara State. He was speaking at an interactive session with stakeholders in the security management of the state.
Here simply on a mission, a peacekeeping mission. We're here for nothing else other than to restore and thereafter maintain peace in Zamfara.
The World Health Organization is reaffirming its pledge to work with the federal government through the Northeast Development Commission to fast-track the rebuilding of the region. WHO officer in charge Nigeria, Clement Lungala Peters, said this when he visited Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa.
In the context of health, it means to strengthen the health systems to be able to deliver. We see pockets of new displacements, which we try to address it, but I think working with the government to ensure that the health systems is built.
Some wives of Nigerian governors are collaborating with other agencies to reverse the statistics that says 7% out of the 70.6% of cancer cases in Nigeria do not get the required health care. The governor's wives are therefore focusing their pet projects on providing care to such patients.
Bringing that awareness to people and also to government and policymakers on how they can effectively bring the changes and the policies that are required to overcome these challenges.
If the governor's wives will have at least one representative in all the wards in the state, so that anytime you have women gathered together, the person can go there and do the advocacy, because education is key.
A three-story building collapsed Monday evening at Abuja Line, Delimi in Jos North local government area. Zenred Dingmum reports that so far 6 people have been evacuated from the debris to a hospital where their health status is yet to be confirmed.
The rescue operators are also giving their support in trying to assist to bring out the people that are trapped from the collapsed building.
3 people to the hospital. 1 is alive, but the other ones we don't know whether they are certified dead by the hospital.
The Presidential Election Petition Court has resumed hearing on the petition of the People's Democratic Party and its candidate, Atiku Abubakar. The court adjourned last Friday as a result of an alleged attack on the witnesses of the petitioners who were coming from Zamfara State, an allegation the Zamfara State Police Command refuted.
Very happy with the ruling of the court admitting all the 48 video CDs that we applied to tender. We are very happy with this milestone.
Legal and research assistants in the country are now being exposed to the use of information communication technology ICT tools to conduct research and aid judges in taking judicial decisions. The capacity training workshop is an initiative of the National Judicial Institute, NJI.
Have become mobile computers, and you can get the latest information at your fingertips. I encourage you to utilize these tools for efficacy in the discharge of your duties.
We can't get everything in the library, so everything is now global based on ICT. So it has really been of help in conducting research.
And those are the news highlights for now. Good morning, Nigeria continues with Kinsley and Jumai after this break. I am Ifoma Wajinta. Good morning.
One football confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hot Sports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the 4th time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. Nigeria's premier sports production and marketing group, Hot Sports, partners with the biggest, the largest and the #1 television network in Africa, the NTA, to give Nigerians a memorable viewing experience. Boost fan support for the Super Eagles to glory in Egypt. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Corruption not in my country.
Hey. Okay, my meter is still running now, and there's units on it.
Now only one light bulb now and there on top of that meter. And see the heavy equipment where they inside your shop. And since last week till this week, now only one unit now you don't use.
At least card and units still there now.
Now only you, they use illegal connection. You don't know say now criminal offense be that.
Mo do paddy now. You understand? One paddy. Mona just collect 2K.
You are the one tapping light illegally, and now you're trying to bribe your way out, Abi. I bet cut the light more they go.
Yes, sir.
What did they worry you?
Okay, wait.
Jeremy, how far now?
Hey,
what's up to our lights now? Shebe, we don't give you money since last month.
Oh,
that's
so this guy I can't cheat them.
You don't turn yourself to a community electricity distributor, Abi. I cannot take this. I'm not in my country.
Not in my country.
This message is from Akin Fadei Foundation with support from Mark Arthur Foundation.
NTA Television College Jos announces admissions into 2-year diploma programs in film and television production, television engineering, and broadcast journalism. The sale of forms will commence on the 13th of May and run through 30th July 2019. Admission forms can be obtained from all marketing offices, NTA state capital stations, zonal centers, or at the office of the academic secretary, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos.
On payment of a non-refundable fee of 7,500 naira in bank draft in favor of NTA TV College. Applicants can also obtain the forms through the NTA TV College portal at www.ntatvc.edu.nj.
Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE or SSCE in relevant areas of study in not more than 2 sittings, including English and mathematics. All properly completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before 30th July 2019. For further inquiries, please visit our website at ntatvc.com or call 0803-3144-383.
NTA TV College, training you to be the best you want to be.
Registrar, Announcer.
Inflation drops from 11.40% in the month of May to 11.22% in June as Nigeria strategizes to penetrate United States market. Let's join Kunle Ade for details.
The Consumer Price Index released by the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the June inflation rate of 11.22% represents a decrease of 0.18% points over the rate recorded in May. On month-on-month basis, the NBS report further states that the index increased by 1.07% in June 2019, which is 0.44% rate lower than 1.11% recorded in May. In another development, in line with the federal government's Economy Recovery Growth Plan ERGP, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is to participate in the Chicago Business Summit to upward review Nigeria's utilization of the African Growth and Opportunity Act. This is with a view to shift economic conversation from aid to trade, as the United States remains an untapped market for authentic African products.
We have to find ways and means through the economic diversification agenda to promote non-oil exports. So anything non-oil exports, provided that it meets the terms and conditions for entry into US, we can use that avenue, those products to get access to the US markets.
And next is the details of Monday's tradings on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Many thanks, Kunle, for the business packet. The newspaper review segment is next on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, our newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoyebe is right here with us in the studios for this edition of a review. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you. Can stay. Good morning.
Good morning, Bayo.
Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, Jube, let's begin with you.
Yeah, we have the Daily Trust newspaper.
Two newspapers we're having this morning.
Actually, we don't have many newspapers this morning. So, just below the masthead, police parade 13 suspects over kidnap of Magajin Garindaura. You find that on page 5. Professor Bande, what I will do as anchor president. That's on page 3. NCC remits 51 billion to FG in first quarter. You find that on page 17. And the bold headlines there, Obasanjo to Buhari, Nigeria approaching tipping point. With a rider, mind your utterances, presidency tells leaders. And the picture message there, several fell dead as building collapses in Jos. This is just too many happening across the country, exactly. And I think that's just what we have on Daily Trust, quite disturbing story. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look also at the Nigerian pilot. There's some interesting stories inside the paper at page 7. For instance, we have 4 stories. We'll do better in 2023. That's according to INEC chairman. We're ready to rescue Leah Sharibu by peace or force, and that's attributed to the presidency. Eligibility, that's the kicker. That's the story immediately below that of the presidency on Leah Sharibu. Wike, governor of Rivers, wins age falsification suit at Supreme Court. And last but not the least on the page, don't renew tenure of service chiefs. Coalition wants Buhari, advises. That should be advices, not warning. The president could appoint whomsoever he chooses.
Yes.
Bayo, on that note,
let's start from the human interest story. A 3-story building caved in yesterday in Jos. This is in the area, one area in Jos. Some persons, Jos North local government area, yes. Some persons, including the owner of the building, were said to have been trapped in the house. Spectators say it was a disaster waiting to happen. They had noticed cracks on the building, and in fact laborers were there trying to fix the cracks when the building went under. Persons who were trapped under the rubble began to make contact with other persons, apparently using their cell phones to call people. A rescue were on. Eventually, as at the time of report, 6 people were brought out, 3 of them unfortunately dead. The ground floor of the 3-story building is said to house a pharmacy owned by the owner of the house, and incidentally his wife and his kids were among those that were trapped in the house. Rescue is being coordinated by National Emergency Management as well as State Emergency Management and the Red Cross. The paper, another story that is making the topic of the day, is former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who has said in an open letter to President Muhammadu Buhari that very onerous crowd is gathering over Nigeria and it could result into roar of destruction, violence and disunity. The letter was made public but by his media assistant yesterday in Abuja. However, the presidency has also reacted to that letter. Special Assistant to the President on Media, Garba Shehu, says that the presidency knows with concern the mother of Mrs. Funke Olakure. The president has condoled the family and in fact had followed up with the telephone conversation to the family. The vice president also visited the family, and moments like this requires our thoughts and prayers with the family. At a time like this, it is incumbent on all leaders to consider their language and potential consequences. The presidency says the tragedy are not times for politics. it reveals that it reveals a disrespect for the departed and the family. In another development, Alhaji Tanko Yakasei has described the latest open letter by the former president to as very inappropriate and an invitation to chaos and disaster. He says his experience showed that the top echelon of the military are always in the habit of fighting one another, either in service or out of service. He described the former president's letter, which he said wrote to President Goodluck Jonathan, the former president Umar Musa Yar'Adua, as very unpatriotic. He also recalled that he wrote the same letter to General Abdulsalami Abubakar, General Babangida, and also General Sani Abacha, which culminated in his imprisonment. He says he is puzzled at the suggestion of the convocation of another national conference, and he is advising that rather than convocate another national conference, there should be a resort to the 2014 national conference, and it should be revisited. A parallel to this was what happened over the weekend. The trio of General Yakubu Gowon, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, and Chief Ernest Shoneka, it was revealed, prevailed on Speaker Gali Umar Naaba, as well as Senate President Pius Anyim Pius, not to impeach President Olusegun Obasanjo between the 1999 and 2007. He says that he identified Gali Umar Abba at the book launch about late Major General Emmanuel Abisoye and said, "Thank you, Gali Umar Abba, for heeding to advice." Now, this was not made public until 2 days ago over the weekend, and that is the statesman way to always advise behind the scene to avert national crisis. This is commended to our leaders as a means of solving national problems. The other story of concern is the report, Kingsley, you read yesterday, about 5 soldiers who were asked to escort some money to somewhere in Jaji, and they ended up cutting the money away. 3 of them are lance corporals, 2 are corporals, and they left Sokoto and they were supposed to escort the consignment, which is alleged to have contained some millions of naira to Jaji. They, upon getting close to Jaji, they melted away and they disappeared. The good news is that 2 of them have already been arrested. The spokesman for the 8th Division, Lieutenant Colonel Audu Arigi, says that they were detailed for a legitimate escort, and they chose to rob the very important personality. Daily Trust reports that the personality who had the consignment is likely to be a very senior military officer. And also in Kaduna, there are concerns about demonstrations by bank workers who says their activities, they have been laid off without being paid their due entitlements. 60 workers of a commercial bank have been laid off, and they are part of the 920 staff that have been reportedly sacked all over the country. The snag is this: they were employed through an agent, call it Force Work. Force Work will employ them. The banks pay Force Work 100,000 a month, and Force Work pays these retainers 40,000 naira a month. They are not permanent staff of the bank, they are casual staff, and some of them are given targets as commercial officers to follow up. They bring in customers. After a year or 2, when they are not able to bring in more customers, they are dispensed with because they are not staff of the bank. And in the current dispensation, the bank say that they are not the one that engaged them. It is an outsourced agency that employ them and has laid them off. That has been described as modern day slavery, and I think the Central Bank of Nigeria must look into it.
Well, I mean, Bayo, you've raised a number of issues. Let's begin with this casualization of staff, or the engagement of temporary staff, through third-party agents. And this is fairly common, it is said, in the banking sector. And here is the banking sector with all kinds of ills, including the fact that they declare huge paper profits. They are not financing or funding real sector growth in the economy. So why is it difficult for you to have staff on your, is it difficult for you to engage persons who will be on your staff list and therefore have proper career prospects? That's the most important thing. I mean, if a staff or any temporary staff, as it were, has been engaged and the person is sitting on his or on the edge of a seat, how is the person going to concentrate on the job? What professional exams will the individual require to grow? I mean, we've always had banks in this country. In the past, is that the way they were casualizing bank workers? And those banks, you know, were profitable. But now you have banks declaring billions. I'm sure very soon you'll be hearing trillions of profit after tax, and yet, you know, you can't engage, you know, a few hundred more of your staff to have a proper career growth path.
And there is a consequence which they always don't want to get published. These persons, because they don't have commitment to the bank, tend to perpetrate fraud.
That's right.
And you find that they open another account and keep on passing money onto it. Before they know it, either they disappear or they melt away.
Systematic stealing, 1 naira, 50
Actually,
kobo.
yes.
And what beats me is they pay them 100,000 and then they pay these casual people 40,000. Isn't that greed?
Yes.
Well, it is, but the other aspect is because some of them are assigned marketing duties. You then found that at some point, I don't know whether it's still prevalent, it just turned into some form of exotic prostitution.
Yes.
Particularly, you know, for the female members. If you were given a target to go and bring hundreds of millions, where will you get that? In the economy that you are not funding? In the economy that you are not financing the businesses for the real sector to grow? Where will the money come from?
And they often tell them, we don't care how you get it. In
That's
fact, there is an instance in the Southeast, I think somewhere in the neighborhood, where a lady had to sue because she was disposed of in such circumstances.
Yes.
Meanwhile,
The other one of the rank and file, you know, disappearing with the money. I don't know, well, it said millions or probably thousands. There was no e-transaction in that one.
No e-transaction.
Why should somebody travel with so much money?
Physical cash.
Physical cash.
Millions.
And then, you know,
they moved from 8th division towards Jaji.
Yes. No e-transaction?
Maybe the financial intelligence unit should hear this.
Yes.
There's also, sadly, the story about kidnapping. In fact, 2 stories now. In Adamawa State, a gang of kidnappers, about 5 of them, have surrendered to the Adamawa State Police Command. And the Commissioner of Police, Adamu Madaki, says that this was as a result of negotiations. And he's calling on those who are still in the mountains to give up their arms and submit themselves, because sooner or later, kidnapping is evil and they will be arrested. We hope there will be more of that. But unfortunately, in Bayelsa State, in Odoni, the home of the Siasias who were invaded, Mrs. Beauty Siasia, 76-year-old mother of Samson Siasia, was taken away. Her home was invaded about 2 a.m. and she was taken away on the waterways of River Nun. There's no information about her whereabouts. The sad thing is that it's not the first time. The same Mrs. Siasia was kidnapped sometime in November 2015 for 12 days.
Don't you think there's an inside contact in there that just gives them all the information about security? How can they just go into somebody's house and just pick her up twice?
When criminals are armed with guns and they come in the dead of the night, 2 a.m., there will be no resistance. And the poor woman will have nothing but just to succumb. Wake her from her sleep before she knows where she is and recover herself properly. They already whisk her away.
One for that matter.
Yes, we just hope that the security agencies will get on top of that. Well, it's one of those rare circumstances, Bayo, where they say lightning doesn't normally strike twice at the same place.
Yes.
There are very few cases of the same person, you know, who has been kidnapped more than once. And ex-security experts use that to indicate the fact that it shows how organized, you know, the crime of kidnapping is. They probably have a register, a data bank of who has been kidnapped, you know, how much was released, so who to avoid, and so on and so forth. So we do hope that Samson Siasia was our guest on Good Morning Nigeria, discussing, you know, the Cup of Nations taking place in Egypt, and of course, our sympathy goes to him, and we hope that the security agencies will be on top of that. Yeah, Bayo.
You recall there was some time ago, while Mikel Obi was representing Nigeria at the World Cup, his father was also abducted in Jos. You remember?
That's true. Yes. That's true. Now, by talking sports, rather, I was just wondering, you know, yesterday we didn't have enough time because we all seem to be in a money mood trying to recover from the loss of the Super Eagles at AFCON. There was also the tennis aspect, Wimbledon. There are some things that sometimes we need to pay attention to because when you look at some of these elite sports, and what is inherent in it. We occasionally, if we don't read between the lines or drill down, we might lose the focus. Look, Novak Djokovic defeated Roger Federer in the final. And Simona Halep, of course, beat Serena Williams, ladies final. What was the prize money for Novak Djokovic in winning the men's singles title? 2 weeks, 7 matches. He won £2.35 million. Multiply that roughly by an exchange rate of, say, 450 naira to £1. That will give you over £1 billion.
Wow.
And the female?
Female, same price.
Oh, now
over 1 billion naira, 2 weeks. And if you qualified for the main draw, that's 128 players, and you lost in the first round, you earned £45,000. That is over 20 million naira.
Even by losing?
By losing. First round. Because, of course, you have to have a certain ranking for you to qualify for the main draw. And then, of course, there are persons who also play qualifiers, like Coco, Coco who beat Venus Williams. So what does this tell you? This is just one tournament. This is one tournament, and of course you have several tournaments around the year. So what are we doing? We keep talking about skill acquisition, where people have been taught how to knit and so on and so forth. Tennis is a skill.
It's a skill.
Boxing is a skill. Wrestling is a skill.
Sports in itself.
Absolutely. One of the biggest industries you can think of in the world. And if people have skills in all of these areas, you can tell, how they will be gainfully employed, how they will be engaged. Of course, if you are a tennis pro, you have your own team. You have a full team whom you employ. Your business manager, your coach, your physio,
your media outfit,
absolutely.
It's a whole package.
It's a whole package. One tournament, and then of course next month you have the US Open.
It's good that Wimbledon now is equated the pay now for the men's and the women's title. Already this last World Cup for the female, the American team that won has embarked on campaign of equal pay for the men as well as the women, because they are fighting against discrimination in payment on the basis of gender. But the critical point that Kingsley has raised, some persons are naturally have the talents for some of these sports. The challenge for us is to develop the skills,
the opportunity.
Apart from was it Nduka his name?
Nduka
Odizo, who was prominent in tennis. After him, we seem not to have had any Nigerian coming up prominently in the tennis.
That's right. Nduka Odizo reached the 4th round of Wimbledon in 1983.
Yes.
No, they like playing it on the computer, but not physically.
All right, Bayo, of course, when people are talking about, just one last point, Bayo, before you go. It's when you keep saying infrastructure, developing infrastructure, people just think it's roads.
Not only roads.
When you are
human capital.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You are building sports centers, you are developing, getting the private sector to invest. These are the kind of things you need.
Equipping talented persons.
People are on holidays now, what would they be doing? They're hacking granite on their heads and whatnot.
Video games. Thank you, Bayo.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
All right.
All right, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll be dealing with our principal item for discussion this morning, immigrant e-registration plus abuse of expatriate quota.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day. They are there silently, guarding, waiting, listening, and watching. They are there ready in the sky above and the waters below, in the blistering heat of the day, in the dead of night, willing, indefatigable, determined in the defense of the sovereignty of our country. They are our first line of defense and our last. They who have paid the ultimate price in defending us. They are fathers and uncles. They are mothers and sisters and girlfriends and boyfriends. They are brothers and cousins and best friends and neighbors. They are classmates, colleagues, and citizens of this nation. They are our defenders and deserve our respect, our prayers, our thoughts. Nigeria, please support our armed forces.
One Football Confederation, 24 teams, 6 stadiums, 4 cities, 504 African stars, 1 trophy. The Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2019 comes alive from June 21 with the showpiece final on July 19, 2019. Watch the 52 matches of the tournament live on Africa's biggest and largest television network, NTA, in partnership with Hot Sports. Be part of the biggest soccer fiesta in the African continent as the Super Eagles go on a bold mission to clinch the prestigious title for the fourth time, to the excitement of millions of fans across the length and breadth of Nigeria. For inquiries, please contact Abubakar on 0803-331-0175 and Felix on 0803-308-2375. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
Thanks for staying, and to kickstart our conversation on this subject matter, let's take this background report by Serafina Okon. We'll be right back.
The world over, people migrate for many reasons. While some follow regular means of moving from one country to the other, others engage in irregular migration, which has continued to be a challenge to governments around the world. The United Nations estimates that about 214 million people live outside their countries of origin, while 40% of the total global migrant population has moved to a neighboring country within their region of origin. As countries try to cope with the challenges of providing for their citizens, attention is shifted to migrants who are sometimes seen as a cause of the societal problems in their host communities. This is aggravated by the fact that many of these people are in those countries without proper documentation, hence susceptible to all manner of suspicions. Nigeria is a home to many migrants who have lived and earned their living without any molestation. However, the challenges with insecurity, terrorism and other crimes have led to the need to verify who is in Nigeria from any other country and what they are doing. For some time now, there has been suspicion that some crimes are allegedly committed by non-Nigerians, which has given authorities concern. It is in a bid to address these challenges that the federal government recently launched the Migrants E-Registration and Data Processing Centers across the country to facilitate the documentation of migrants living in Nigeria for more than 90 days. This program also comes with a 6-month amnesty period for those who have already stayed in the country beyond 90 days. They are requested to take advantage of this window to regularize their stay in the country without any payment or penalty. It is also a call for those who intend to stay in the country for a period exceeding 90 days to submit themselves to the Nigerian Immigration Service through these centers across the Federation. While some welcome this development, others feel it is coming too late. But as they say, it is better late than never. Questions that may arise are: what is the procedure for this registration? Who is eligible? Are there exemptions to the rule? What happens to those who fail to register after the amnesty period? Will the registration provide sufficient data to account for the total number of migrants residing in Nigeria? Will this be a continuous process or a one-off development? These are some of the questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria will be required to answer shortly.
All right, thank you very much, Serafina Okon, for that backgrounder. We have with us here guests as well as another guest at our Lagos Network Center. First with us here in the Abuja studios, let's welcome the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Immigration Service, Muhammad Babandede. CG, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Good morning, viewers.
Okay. And also here with us in the studios, we would like to welcome the Chief of Mission of the International Office of Migration, Franz Celestine. Franz Celestine, pleasure to have you with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay.
And also joining us on set is Matthias Essene, Head West Africa International Center for Migration Policy and Development. You're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Mr. Ona Ekyomo, a security expert, joins us from our Lagos studio. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
All right, gentlemen, let's begin the conversation first with the Comptroller General of Immigration. What exactly is the migrant or immigrant e-registration?
Before 2015, immigration has an act called the Immigration Act, which was passed by Parliament in 1963, but we amended it in 2015. That act allows us as immigration officers to register what we call aliens. It was a very derogatory name, which we inherited from the British masters. Anybody who was not a citizen of Commonwealth was seen as an alien. So that law, since independent, through 1963 up to 2015, allow us only to register people who we consider aliens. So we would not be able to register British citizens, we would not be able to register Commonwealth citizens. That's why we had a whole section called the alien section. So in 2015, we had a new act which removed the word alien, but only talk about migrant, people who are not our citizens in our territory. In 2017, we took a regulation to our minister, the then Minister of Interior, Abrahman Dambazau, because he was empowered to make a regulation in the act. And he made an immigration regulation. That immigration regulation allows Immigration Service to keep a register of any person who is not a citizen of Nigeria. And the Controller General has been empowered by law to determine how the register is to be kept. So based on the powers conferred on the Controller General decided that this registration would be an inform. That is the meaning. It means we'll register every person who is in our territory who has spent a period exceeding 90 days. That person, whether he's a visitor or a resident, must register, and that register will be biometric. We are glad to state that on our website, we have provided opportunity for people to start registering. And when they register, download their documents, they will come to immigration office for capturing of their biometrics and their facial. So it will be documented. That's the meaning of the e-registration.
What is the purpose of registering an immigrant who has overstayed the 90-day welcome period?
We send a memo to Mr. President. We need to give incentive to people who are in our territory who have stayed irregularly for them to come out. We're not the only people who started this. Countries like Spain have done it. Saudi Arabia has just concluded one. For you to invite people to come and register, you need to give them incentive. And that incentive was given by Mr. President on the 12th of this month when he flagged off the registration. Mr. President said that anybody who is staying in an irregular position, it doesn't matter how irregular you are free to come and register because he has given an amnesty. It means we will not deport the person, will not charge him for overstay. He will register provided he has entered Nigeria before his declaration, and that registration is done between now and 6 months. So that's the amnesty Mr. President has given. I'm glad this will give incentive to 4 categories of migrant. People who have entered legally into our territory, you enter as a visitor, and then you found yourself overstaying for a longer period. You can now come and register. You don't need to worry that on your way out we charge fees, because we charge fees. If you overstay, we charge you according to the period you overstay. Now, we will not charge you. Come and register, then you can leave. No problem. There are categories of people who also entered through illegal routes. You are aware Nigeria is a vast area of border. Even sometimes through the airport, it's possible for somebody to avoid checking, presenting before immigration officer. We know about them. So today, you are free to come and register without penalty. You'll be forgiven. We have categories of persons who are staying legally, but are doing illegal job. I give you an example. You are a wife of a managing director of a company who has the right to reside in Nigeria. So you accompany your husband. You decided to take up employment without the consent of the Controller General of Immigration Service. That person is staying illegally, because that person is doing job which has not been approved by the Controller General. That person can register. So this amnesty by Mr. President is to invite people who are in an irregular position to be regular.
You were talking about the borders earlier, and our borders, everybody knows Nigerian borders is porous. And some, like in the northeast now, where the border with Cameroon, Nigeria, and other countries, there are people who have moved into these areas, lived there for years, have children. Do they come out too to register? Absolutely. They've sort of assimilated into the system.
Absolutely.
Some of them cannot even be detected that they are not Nigerians. So are they being encouraged to come out, to register, and be a part of the process?
During the election, this concluded election, we seized many voters' cards in thousands, and we gave it back to INEC. Many people assume because they have stayed in our territory, probably you're a Hausa-speaking person, you are from Niger, you have stayed in Nigeria for many years, you just assume you're a Nigerian. It's not so. Or you're a Yoruba man from Ogun, you have entered Nigeria, stayed for many years, have children, you are a Nigerian, you are not. So this amnesty includes those people, even if you have a Nigerian passport. Even if you have a Nigerian passport, if you come to us and say, look, I have made a false declaration, I obtained a Nigerian passport, because it's an offense. We have been arresting, prosecuting people for having Nigerian passport while they have gotten fake document from local government. We will forgive you, because Mr. President has given the amnesty. So it includes those people who even got a passport, who are staying in our territory, who claim to be Nigerian. When they come and say, look, I am a citizen of Benin Republic, I want to declare that I got a Nigerian passport by mistake, we'll collect the passport, we'll allow him to go and get his national passport.
Comptroller General of Immigration, what rights and privileges are intended to be conferred by the e-registration and the presidential amnesty?
No, the right is that you have forgiven. Let me give you an example. If you stay for a period exceeding a period like, let's say, 1 month, you can pay a penalty of up to $1,000. That's a great incentive. So if we see you at the border, let's say today at Murtala Mohammed Airport, a Chinese man wants to leave Nigeria, and we find out that he has overstayed for a period of 30 days. We say your penalty is $2,000, for example. He said, no, 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 no. There is an amnesty. Let me go back and register. We'll allow him to go and register and enjoy the amnesty and come and pass through free. But if he insists going, he will pay the penalty. So it's a great incentive for you to make yourself normal. In these days, we have been arresting many people at the airports who have been overstaying and they have to pay penalty. It will also give opportunity for you to make your life better if you are taking wrong employment. We have many families, even sometimes families of diplomats who are not supposed to work. When they work, we come across them, we consider them committing an offense. So police is a great incentive by Mr. President.
I'd like to repeat my question with regard to rights and privileges intended to be conferred. Will the e-registration and the presidential amnesty therefore entitle such a registrant to continuing stay?
That's absolutely what we're saying. If you are staying irregularly for 10 years and you appear before the registration officer and say, look, I'm staying 10 years without papers, you will be forgiven for the period you have overstayed. You will be advised how to be normal and continue staying in Nigeria as a legal person. But if you refuse to do that until after the amnesty will come across you, you'll be deported.
Does that confer a right of citizenship?
No, 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 no. Citizenship is different from residency. You have the right of residency. It's different from being a citizen of Nigeria. There are things that a Nigerian citizen can do that if non-Nigerian cannot do. He cannot contest election. He cannot be voted. There are some properties he cannot own. So it's a different issue. When you reside in a territory which is not your own, you are different from a national.
In other words, Comptroller General of Customs, you are saying that this is a right of residency, therefore there is a limitation as to what the rights and privileges of such an individual can be.
Every non-Nigerian staying in Nigeria has a limited right compared with a citizen of Nigeria. To give you an example, you cannot vote. You cannot be voted. Although in some countries, some people who are non-citizens who have stayed over a period of time, they're allowed to vote because it affects them as a right resident. They pay tax, they participate in governance, so they will be expected to participate in voting. But in Nigeria now, as a non-Nigerian, you cannot be voted, you cannot vote, you cannot take certain form of employment except approved. For example, you cannot be a citizen of UK. You come to Nigeria and open a restaurant without permission. Yes, you can open a special type of restaurant which the Minister of Interior approves the business model. But you cannot do certain jobs. So there is a restriction for non-Nigerians.
Well, there have been speculations in some quarters, Comptroller, that at times the immigration officers turn a blind eye to this kind of, abuse of privileges by expatriate or the quota itself. So what are you doing to ensure that this new e-registration and expatriate quota does not continue now?
People should know the difference between expatriate quota and the individual rights to work. Expatriate quota is a grant given by Ministry of Interior to a company to employ expatriate. That company can be purely Nigerian company, can be foreign company 100%, can be a joint venture. For example, a company can be allowed, like Julius Berger, to bring a financial controller because probably the share capital of the company is partly owned by foreign partners. So the Nigerian partners can also have another position. That position is not for individual, it's for the company. So at any time the company gets somebody, he can be any national, he can occupy that position. And that position has a requirement. That's expatriate quota. But there are people who can work without expatriate quota. Let me give you an example like our citizen in ECOWAS sub-region. Citizens in ECOWAS have the right to take up any employment after 90 days, but they too, they need permission. So if they stayed over a period of 90 days now, we expect them to get this amnesty. You are working, you are pushing a trolley, you are doing megat, you are working in a restaurant. Yes, you have the right to be here for 90 days. After 90 days, you should seek permission of Controller General of Immigration to take up employment. I know there are a lot of abuses, but this is opportunity for everybody to correct it.
Okay, CJ, thanks. We'll return to the issue of abuse of expatriate quota and other allied matters with regard to the e-registration. But let's bring in now the Chief of Mission of the International Organization for Migration. That's France Celestine, whom we earlier introduced. Of course, all around the world, migration is a hot item. We have seen what happens to young Africans, who are crossing the perilous seas to get into Europe. In the U.S., we have seen President Donald Trump over the weekend threatening to start grabbing people and deporting them right from the street. What is the IOM's observation with regard to migration issues in Nigeria?
Well, we, as the International Organization for Migration, work with all of our member states. And Nigeria happened to be one of our very strong member states. And I'm happy to be sitting next to the CGI, whom I think is such a visionary and how he's transformed Nigerian immigration service. So it made it a lot easier for IOM to work with Nigerian immigration service because he has the vision he wants to implement. We simply provide the support. So in a country like Nigeria, and when you have an active CGI such as Mr. Babandedi, we have seen the way immigration and migration itself transform in Nigeria. So what I have worked in East Africa, I've worked in the Caribbean, I've covered quite a number of countries, and this is one of the most effective one that I've worked with. And I think the last few years working with Mr. Babandedi has been very fruitful. So when we have somebody in place like this, the evolution that we've seen, both from a training and also from a technology standpoint, is remarkable. The Nigerian Immigration Service has been quite effective in putting in place the Migration Information Data Analysis System, which it's a software that IOM provides to its member states to manage migration, to know who's coming, for how long, for what purpose. And we are working with Nigerian Immigration Service to install it at all the major border posts and all the major airports. I can give you some examples. Even in the Katsina area, within a few weeks of installing the MIDAS system, the Nigerian Immigration Service were able to stop 5 young girls from Edo State who were being trafficked outside of the country. So this symbiotic relationship that we have with the NIS has been good in protecting Nigerians, and also in terms of people being trafficked, reducing the level of smuggling that we see in the country, and also looking from the security side, protecting Nigeria in general. But so I've seen the trend in terms of people going north to Libya, and I'm pretty sure you know the numbers have drastically reduced from at one point to 381,000 people crossing into Italy and Europe to what it is now today, less than 31,000. So there is the effort that is being made from different countries, but certainly what we've seen from Nigeria side is an important step to save lives and to make sure that when people migrate, they do so in a dignified and safe manner.
Well, fine, thanks. We're talking about Nigerians who are seeking to emigrate. My colleague Juma mentioned this, and indeed it's a notorious fact that Nigeria's borders aren't effectively policed to a large extent. What kind of support has the IOM rendered to the immigration service or to Nigeria in general with regard to regulating, controlling, or otherwise managing the huge influx of persons, from elsewhere into Nigeria itself?
Right. I mean, this is a really good question because our efforts to work with the NIS has a whole of society approach that involves all of the MDAs. This is why the National Migration Policy was put in place to get all the MDAs together to see how we can have a comprehensive approach to migration management. So integrated border strategy, again, the CGIs have been leading this conversation. The NIS has been providing the leadership to all of the relevant ministries and also agencies, including customs. The NIS recently put together the national border strategy, which the CG can give you more detail about. What I've seen is what the NIS has done, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together to accomplish something. And the steps are gradual, and I think they are forward-looking. But in terms of what we have done, again, following the leadership of the NIS, because as an international organization, we follow our member states. We act at the behest of our member states. So following the leadership of the NIS, and I believe it was a few months ago, the CGI and I had a conversation about mobile MIDAS, getting the necessary equipment where the Nigerian Immigration Service can patrol its borders with this software that allows it to capture those who are coming in, even those who are going. And this was designed actually to look at the borders that are not physically manned. So you have the equipment with the necessary, the trucks and the satellites to move around the borders. And this is something that we intend to put in place in the next few months. We sat down a few months ago and the CG told me, okay, this is what I want. This is where we'd like to have them. And then we said, okay, we can certainly do it. So there is the migration, the national migration policy, the diaspora policy, the border strategy. There are a number of products that we've worked with such ministries of interior, ministries of labor, ministries of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and of course agencies like NIS, NAPTIP, and NCFRMI to have a whole of, not only a whole of government approach, but also a whole of society approach, because migration itself is such a complex phenomenon. One set of policy may not be enough to address it. So we have to put a comprehensive approach, a multi-pronged approach to get it done.
Okay, thank you so much. I will now come into Matthias Asene, Head West Africa International Center for Migration Policy and Development. Migration is the word and everybody sleeps across the world. Positive or negative, people will have to talk about it. In Nigeria, Security concerns has also pointed the infiltration of criminal elements into the country through these borders. So what is your agency doing to enlighten, to educate people on this movement, on how they should go about it? What are they supposed to do to go legally into another country from Nigeria? And those coming into Nigeria, criminal elements who pose are Nigerians. What are you doing to make sure that a lot of awareness is raised and these people are brought to book?
Okay, thank you very much. Just to start, the International Center for Migration Policy Development, ICMPD, it's a regional organization that is comprised of 17 member states, essentially all are Europeans. And just last December, we had the membership of Turkey and Malta, because these are two important countries, because they provide corridors for people who are migrating towards Europe. Now, having said that, I like to start my conversation by first of all trying to maybe for us to rethink the way we see migrants. You know, it's very convenient for people to kind of link criminality to migration. Now, if we assume that criminal elements filter into Nigeria as a result of the migration flow, that's one of the things that make the conversation very toxic. You know, because there is this presupposition that if something is done, it must not be one of us. It must be somebody else. The problem with that is when we begin to see some kind of problem with Nigerian migrants, for instance, in South Africa, who experience xenophobic attack, in the same breath, we are concerned and we try to see how we can engage and how the Nigerian migrant will be protected. Now, it's the same thing for us. When migrants come in, and we quickly forget and flip it over and think that criminal elements are featuring into Nigeria. The point I'm trying to make is, even if people are staying irregularly in your country, does not automatically make them criminals. I think we need to get that far. Then in terms of what we are doing, first of all, ICMPD in Nigeria, we are part of a consortium which involves, of course, even led by the International Organization for Migration, that's the IOM, and at some point, France was actually the program manager of the FMM project. We have the ILO in that consortium. We're supporting, first of all, the ECOWAS Commission and the ECOWAS member states in a variety of in different aspects of migration. But when it comes to giving out information regarding regular migration, in fact, that's one of the principle that drives ICMPD, because it's not enough for people to talk about the it's not enough for us to talk about the foes and the dangers of irregular migration without providing alternatives. You know, and the alternatives to create regular channel for people to migrate, because as it is, migration is inherently human. Yes. People will continue to migrate. Migration is a means of survival. Whether you are migrating internally or internationally, this is a reality. All we need to do is to manage it. Like France has just mentioned, what is most important is not to tell people not to migrate, not exactly, but actually to inform them that if they must migrate, they should migrate in dignity and go through legal channels.
All right, Matthias is saying, of course, we know that migration is a global phenomenon, and some of the more unsavory stories that we've heard, of course, those stories have often involved Africans trying to get into Europe or the Americas or elsewhere. Can we try to reduce this or narrow it down to the West African sub-region? Because that's part of the bit that you cover. How much of intra-West Africa migration do we see? Now, the perception is that Nigeria, being of course the largest economy on the African continent and with many more opportunities that others we don't have, is a magnet for migrants. So against the background of the e-registration for irregular migrants, what is it that your data bank reveals with regard to the flow or outflow of migrants within the West African sub-region, taking advantage of the ECOWAS protocol on migration or movement of persons?
Absolutely. About 83% of the international migration flow in this region happen within the sub-region. So it means less than 20% actually go out. So that's to tell you the importance of the migration flow along the various corridors in West Africa. Just to start with, the registration of migrants is not something sublime. It's not something new. It's not something out of this world. It's something that countries do. But what has made the NIS initiative a little bit something to really cheer about is the fact that it's e-registration. So it means that people at their convenience and they have a 6 month period to do that, So that's just to simplify the migrant registration process for all class of migrant. But it's very important that we distinguish, as you have done, between community citizens who are citizens of other ECOWAS member states, and of course, again, third country migrants. Ordinarily, third country migrant, that means migrants who are out of the West African space, will require a visa to come to Nigeria, except that if Nigeria has a visa-free agreement with such a country. Otherwise, you require a visa, for instance. So that forms part of your documentation. So it is expected that immigration will already have that kind of data. Now, for West African migrants who do not require visas to come in, there are some form of documentations that you provide, for instance, the standard passports, But now there are some advancement in the implementation of the ECOWAS protocol and some new regulations that are also coming out, which we are all supporting. That includes the use of biometric ID card as a travel document. Because now, many a time when we talk about porous border, we get the impression, and I don't really like to say that our borders are porous. Because if we understand the nature of this border, I don't think porosity is the right description of what it is. Our borders are contiguous. That is the reality. Because porous border presupposes that you actually, first of all, have this barrier, a clear demarcation, and probably even a buffer zone, and perhaps out of incapacity or for whatever reason, or a breach, you are not able, people violate those corridors that have been coded off. But what we see in Africa, and given our history, these borders are contiguous. You have even communities. I just give a very...
and there are countries without contiguous borders unless you have treacherous terrains, such as mountains and so on and so forth, all around the world.
Of course, we know, for instance, there are countries that are islands of their own, like Cabo Verde, do not have any land border, for instance. But ours is not just that it's a contiguous border, it's contiguous to the extent that cultures interact. The people across this border speak the same language. These are people who have the same culture. I was just going to give an example of something, a place called, there's a Cambia district, it's in Sierra Leone, a community called Balamuya, shares, it's at the corridor with Guinea-Bissau, for instance. Now we have a border post built by the European Union, a joint border post that facilitates, and they have very good practice. But just between the buffer zone, there is a building, there's a house. I have photograph of it. I was there a couple of weeks ago. There is a building, one part of it falls on the Sierra Leonean side, the other part of it falls on the Nigerian side. Now, how do you manage people who find themselves in such circumstances? So that's why, for instance, the introduction of the ECOWAS National Biometric ID card will help if you use that as a travel document instead of using the standard passport, because that helps you to promote this integration that we're trying to, or we are all trying to follow.
Okay, but Matthias Senate, thank you very much. We'll return to you to explain further aspects of migration within the West African sub-region, as well as the IOM Chief of Mission, who is still with us here in the Abuja studios. Let's go over now to our Lagos Network Center. Dr. Ona Ehomo, of course, is a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria. You've listened to all the issues that have been raised in the meantime by the guests here with us in the Lagos studios. First of all, from your perspective, is the immigrant e-registration process potentially a game changer in terms of proper identity management of migrants, and what are the likely security implications going forward?
Thank you very much, Honorable Kinsley, and thanks to all your guests for enlightening us about the immigration issues or migration issues in the sub-region and specifically in our country. Well, the e-migrant initiative, e-migrant project is a laudable one. Back in 2013, then Minister of Interior Abba Moro had said that they were going to start something of this nature. And like the CGI told us a few minutes ago, it was with the immigration regulation of 2017 signed by General Dambaza that we're able to, he was duly empowered to now make this particular initiative. Now, in terms of the efficacy of the program, I think a big difficulty I have with it is the volunteer nature of it. I understand from what CGI said is to incentivize people. But I think if perhaps we could go out and do a little bit more enforcement, you know, we can get more collaboration, because Nigeria right now is facing a lot of security challenges. One of the goals, or the goals of the program is to curb the current insecurity. And of course, the narrative is that a lot of the kidnappers we have in the bush, a lot of the bandits in Zamfara State and in the Burning Gwarik Trough, they are foreigners. They are from the sub-region. So, you know, this is, immigration is such a critical agency. And it's good that a very brilliant young man is heading that agency in the person of Babandede. But I think it needs to be empowered to do even more, because immigration is at the front line of protecting the nation from bad guys, not minding, talk in this room today that we shouldn't consider all migrants as bad people. Look, legitimate migrants get visas and they come in properly, they obey the laws of the country. I am talking about, people who pass through those 1,499 illegal and irregular border entry points that Mr. Moro spoke about in 2013, and which has been referenced by many other CGIs before Oga here. Now, Oga is, I'm sure, familiar with that concept also. So, you know, we have people who are coming in, and now we have people who are doing us harm because they want to come in, they want to rustle cattle and go across the border. They want to come in and kidnap Nigerians because they can get a lot of cash and whatever. I mean, that really bothers me. So I see the role of the immigration agency beyond just being another NIMSI that is providing ID cards to people or trying to interdict girls going out of Nigeria. I see that more as something for NAPTIP to do. But I see the role of the immigration agency as a frontline border agency to interdict the illegal in-migration of criminals and of people who want to come in here and do harm to Nigerians. We don't need to really wait for bad guys to come in here and set this country on fire before we really take the fight to them or stop them from entering this country. That is really my concern. I think in terms of the Midas program that Mr. Celestine has talked about, that's a brilliant program. We can just go around and register people. But a lot of these guys have to be, they have to come in willingly to be registered. But I think what needs to happen is, one, we need to more firmly secure our borders. And then secondly, we need to go out and get more vigorous enforcement of this particular new registration policy, such that people will have no choice It's not out of the kindness of their hearts. We will have no choice but to come in and register, and such that we know who is in Nigeria, and then we can also exclude the criminal elements that are among us.
All right, Dr. Onai Hamoud, thank you very much. We'll return to you, but let's bring in again the Comptroller General of Immigration, not so young a man, by the way, CGI. Well, Dr. Onai Hamoud has talked about his chief concern about this e-registration, that the volunteer nature of it might not make compulsion on the part of those who would like to regularize their residency status. What's your reaction to that first? And then we have other questions.
I think we need to commend his views that immigration is a key agency in terms of national security. But let me clear the air in terms of the understanding people have on the e-registration. The e-registration is compulsory. It's not voluntary. The act is very clear, the regulation is very clear, that if you don't register after 90 days when you enter Nigeria, you have committed an offense. Not only the migrant, but the person who provides accommodation for the migrant is a key person. I'll give you an example. You have a hotel, you provide accommodation, room for a migrant, the migrant stays for a period exceeding 90 days, the person didn't register, you are also responsible. Landlords, you give room, accommodation, room to a non-Nigerians, and you don't demand that whether he has registered with the immigration is an offense. So the offense is not only for Nigeria, for migrant, but also for people who provide accommodation. So we need to do a lot of engagement. We need to engage the civil society. We need to engage traditional rulers. We need to engage the landlords. We need to engage many people to get involved. So it's not voluntary. It's compulsory. And what we are saying is just incentive. The 6 months is only incentive Mr. President gave. It's a continuous process. We'll continue to register throughout life. But Mr. President just give incentive. I said, look, before we punished, before we deport, before we arrest, we give you the voluntary opportunity to register within these 6 months. So within these 6 months, nobody is an irregular migrant if he registers. But if you don't register after the 6 months, the enforcement will take place. So it's amnesty is given by Mr. President. And I hope people will seize the opportunity for this amnesty. Just also the providers of the accommodation where migrant stays, and the migrant himself should enjoy this amnesty so that he can benefit from what Mr. President has given.
When did the amnesty period begin to run?
6 months.
When did it start to run?
12th of this month, and it will expire 12th of 6 months after.
Okay. Now, I'd like to return, CG, to the question again of rights and privileges, and link that up. Assuming I'm registered, as a migrant, I regularize, my residency. What does that entitle me to? Does it entitle me to hunt for a job in Nigeria? Get employed, or what? What does it entitle me to? Some of the services that ordinarily are available to citizens. I think this point is needed to be. It's necessary for us to clarify it.
That is, the amnesty has a value. I want you to understand between the amnesty and the registration. The registration is a compulsory process for all migrants throughout their life. Any migrant, even after the 6 months amnesty, if the person enters Nigeria, intends to stay or stays for a period exceeding 90 days, that person will register. And if you register, we'll link you with the NIM number. Very interesting to note that we consulted all the security agencies, including National Identity Management Commission, who have the right to register any person who is a resident, even if it's not a Nigerian. So we said, don't worry. Don't look for the non-Nigerian, because we know the non-Nigerian better. Once this non-Nigerian register and submit his registration, we'll forward it to you online, and you will generate a NIN number. So this person will have one identity number, like in the way that we're doing with the e-passport. In the e-passport, the ones we roll. Once you get the new passport, you'll be linked with a NIN number. And your NIN number is linked with your IBN number. So we're having one person that can be checked. It's a big strategy for national security. It's good for national development. It's good for our statistical issues. So the privilege is that with the time, after the 6 months, you will be asked about that number before you get any facility, before you get rent, before you get accommodations, before you get employment. But now we are saying that within the 6 months, you can even get job free. We won't give you any. Once you come to us and say, look, I've been staying in this country irregularly for 10 years. I want to get regularized. We allow you to get regularized and we permit you to get a job. But if not, we'll remove you. You begin to seek for employment from outside. So whenever immigration officer arrests a person and the person will be removed, he will be treated as if he's seeking to enter Nigeria for the first time. But now he has entered Nigeria, we give him the permission to look for a job. It will be granted within that 6 months. So 6 months is a great opportunity. You can show yourself, register, and continue working.
Well, I don't know. Well, I'm sure that Nigerians will be interested in seeking further clarification of this. As you know, for those who have lived outside this country, you would know that you have to have a work permit.
Yes.
If you can have your right of entry or a visa for entry, but for you to be able to work, you must have a work permit. Is there a linkage with the Ministry of Labor with regard to this? Because there have been complaints, again, you can tie this up to expatriate quota, of jobs that Nigerians are qualified to do and are available to do, being snapped up by foreigners.
The job done by members of the ECOWAS region is a job Nigerians are doing better elsewhere. I want Nigerians to understand this very well. Our ECOWAS agreement says that if you enter our territory, any of the members said, we are citizens of ECOWAS. In addition to our citizenship in Nigeria, a Nigerian is a citizen of ECOWAS. So if an ECOWAS citizen enters Nigeria, spend a period of 90 days without any question, provided that person enters through a recognized port and enters with a travel document, that person is entitled to remain in Nigeria. But when he wants to take up employment, he has to seek permission from Control General, and there's no limit. He can be a cleaner, he can open a restaurant. People talk about those foreigners taking out their job. Do you know the number of Nigerians in other territories? If you go to Ghana, if you go to even Niger, if you go to all the West Coast, you'll be shocked of the power of Nigerian controlling those economies. So I don't want people to be looking inward only. You should think global, act local. We are great nations. We have a population that in the next decade will be the third country in the world. We must export our labor and our population. So don't be ethnocentric and think only of Nigeria. It's of great benefit that Nigerians are doing well. You'll be shocked. Just go to Niger. The Niger you think is our neighbor poor country. A lot of Nigerians have huge hotels, huge investment in Nigeria. So don't think only locally in Nigeria. But also, the expatriates that are here, there is nobody allowed to take up employment without permission of the Controller General Immigration Service. And there are three ways to do it. Either through a quota. If the company has an expatriate quota given by the ministry, you can get resident permit. Or if you are working in a free zone is an area where business is allowed to take place without expatriate quota, we can give you resident permit. Or if you are a citizen of a country that is ECOWAS, you can get a permit. So permit is given also in labor. And I don't want Nigerians to be worried. There are a lot of value. If a Nigerian pushes a trolley in the market or cleans a gutter, you think it is not economic benefit to Nigeria? A Nigerian might be having a hotel in Niger, which will give him a job for 50 people or 100 people. So please let us think big. Let us not think only as a small country. We're a great country who will export also labor.
I'm sure, Comptroller General, I'm sure the Nigeria Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress will be in a better position to respond to these points that you have raised, that if you get a foreigner to do this job, then perhaps ignore a Nigerian or we'll have a bigger
I didn't say that.
Well, but that's the implication of what you are saying.
Exactly.
All right, that's a necessary implication. But to return to the point you made, you go to other West African countries, you find Nigerians, who are in business and so on and so forth. There have been recent reports of the discrimination against Nigerians in certain West African countries. Ghana, for instance, there are also discriminated taxes against Nigerians in some of those locations. And their businesses have been required to pay all kinds of levies with threats of closure.
We are, in Ghana in particular, we are tackling Ghana very well. You'll be surprised that as if Ghana deports, we deport. And we are talking with Ghana very well. We have done, last 2 months, the Ghanaian Controller General came to Nigerian Immigration Service passing out parade, and he was there. So we are in the position to retaliate anybody who misbehave against our country. And Foreign Affairs is the lead agency to guide us to do that. But to avoid that crisis, let me tell you there is value for every citizen to consider himself capable of participating in an economy which is unprotected. I'm worried that somebody is worried that somebody is pushing a trolley in the market, but you don't understand that there is somebody who invested heavily. Look, we must be very careful. If we want to protect Nigerians in South Africa, we must protect migrants in Nigeria. That's simple. If Nigerians are discriminated in South Africa, we are fighting against that. We must protect migrants who are in our territory, provided they obey the law, provided they work within the approval system of governance. We must be very careful. Otherwise, the retaliation will be high against our citizens elsewhere.
But protecting migrants in Nigeria, Nigeria has always been soft with migrants. They've been protected. They've not been abused the way Nigerians are abused in other parts of the world. Let's leave the ECOWAS sub-region and go beyond Nigeria, Africa itself. What Kingsley is trying to say, I think, is expatriates coming to take jobs in Nigeria. You know, like oil companies, where they bring all the engineers, they bring everybody into Nigeria, and you find Nigerians just cleaners, you know, taking care of minor things.
Bakeries,
yes,
yeah, where you have,
so you see, and these expatriates are paid in dollars. What we're trying to say is there no space for Nigerian experts? We have them, we're talking about drain all the time. Can't we employ them in Nigeria and pay them the same salary that expatriates are being paid? And some people say these expatriates are not even qualified at times for the job they are doing. So how do you, sort of bring these things together and look at it from a perspective that Nigerians outside this country, outside Africa, should get what we are giving expatriates in Nigeria?
Well, I understand.
How do you marry it?
I understand what you are saying. Like, there's an oil sector.
Yes.
Let's say Ajib or Shell has expatriate that they want to employ. The process is that they go to Ministry of Interior and ask for expatriate quota. We need 10 slots, and now there's even local content agency, which before the expatriate quota is given, the local content agency look at the slots available and said to tell the ministry, look, don't give this slot. It's for Nigerian. The ministry will not give. Give this slot is an area expatriate will require. So there is a relation between Ministry of Interior and the local content agency that determine the slots to be given. Yes, despite that, you are right to say that we have a responsibility to make sure even that slot given as an engineer, it is the engineer that occupies that position, not a useless person. We have to do a lot of investigation. We have to do a lot of monitoring. We are doing that, but this registration will give us opportunity. You are making me to reveal much of what we want. We want to see what is on ground. We want to see that expatriate that registered, that entered as an engineer, he will register whether he's an engineer. We want to know if that mechanical engineer who says he's in the right place. So allow us to take the inventory. Within the 6 months, we'll see who is occupying what positions. We'll be able to react.
Do we have, before we bring in the other guest one more time, CGI, do we have an estimate, for instance, of, shall we say now loosely, illegal immigrants who are in Nigeria, just roughly?
I wish I have. If I have, I will not do the registration. We want to have. Nobody has estimate of irregular people in his territory. But one thing is very clear, that you talk about porous borders, but we talk of contiguous borders. There are a lot of people who are in our territory who have no documentation. After this exercise, we will have thousands of people documented. With the amnesty, it will give us benefit. People will see it, oh, why do we take that risk? But I'm sure we're going to get a large number of people who are not normal, who are not staying regularly, who will be registered. But let me tell you, this registration is for persons who are regular and irregular. It's not only for irregular people. It's for everybody. Anybody who enters Nigeria after, say, 90 days is expected to register, except is an exempted person, like diplomats. Diplomats are exempted. But if you are not exempted, you must register. So we'll be able to have a better statistic after this documentation.
Let's talk about SEPAC, the upward review of the combined expatriate resident permit and alien card. You know, it was set up to check the abuse of expatriate quota and develop local content. Is that working?
Well, I know the increase, many companies cried about the increase of the fee. As operative,
it did go down well with most expatriates.
I also cried as $2,000. Yes, as a controller general, I also cried to my ministry. But the responsibility to increase fees rests with the Minister of Interior. That's the power given to the Minister of Interior. And I think he has seen the value of increase in terms of revenue for government. But as an operative, I have also raised an alarm. And we have received a lot of complaints from expatriates. A lot of that $2,000 is too much. Imagine they retaliate against Nigerians elsewhere. I always look at what will happen to Nigerians in other territory. You charge expatriate $2,000, and if other countries decide to charge $2,000, let's say the Americans charge Nigerians $2,000 for residency, it will be a huge issue for Nigerians. So I know it's too high, but government is looking at it in terms of investment and benefit from this expatriate. I hope so that it will be reviewed, because I have written memos for the review, and I hope when it is reviewed, it will serve better for the migrants.
All right, Controller General of Immigration, thank you very much. Just quickly, because we'll take a short break presently, but Matthias Sene, back to West Africa and the issue of migration. Dr. Ona Ehomo raised the issue, the adjunct of security, and the fact that Nigeria has suffered on account of, in his words, the bad guys who are slithering in and out of the country and causing mayhem and havoc around the axis of Zamfara and the contiguous locations. And back to the question I asked earlier, what do we know, at least from your organization, in terms of the influx of those bad guys, persons who are harming our security, harming our economy, and making life unbearable?
Okay. Now, first of all, I completely understand the point that Dr. Homo was making, because many a time to pursue national interest is not a bad thing itself. So when we have this kind of conversation, you see people talk about there is this nationalistic tendency to protect what is of interest to you. Having said that, now it is difficult to profile the migrant population, for instance, as criminal element, because again, I don't think, apart maybe there are intelligence reports that I'm not aware of, there's nothing to indicate that the people who are involved in criminality in Nigeria are necessarily migrants. I think it's important we separate criminality from migration so that the conversation becomes less toxic, because like the CJ have said, we do have Nigerians in other parts of the world. Now, coming to the northeast axis and of course the northwest, like in Zamfara and all that, if there are bandits causing mayhem, the proper thing to do is to arrest them, and it's not necessarily to profile them as migrant, because that creates some kind of impression in people's mind, whereby you begin to scapegoat, other population because they are different from you. I have heard, just this quick point, I've heard at a point that Nigerians love life so much, it's difficult for a Nigerian to commit suicide. That Nigerians don't engage in suicide bombing, that people who do suicide bombing are foreigners. And I try to interrogate the person who made that assertion if we had any evidence. But today we see that people are committing suicide. So
committing suicide is a different issue. I just, very quickly, because Dr. Ona Ehomo is a security consultant, and we've had him on Good Morning Nigeria discussing various security issues. Dr. Ona Ehomo, Matthias Sene here is saying that, look, segregate issues of migration from criminality, deal with criminality strictly. But earlier you were talking about the fact that there appears to be some linkage between some of the bad guys who are flowing in from elsewhere in the West African sub-region into parts of Nigeria, but are causing mayhem. What's your reaction to what he said?
Thank you very much, Honorable Kingsley. I think we have to keep our knowledge. Well, first, I think the gentleman from IOM said, let's use a whole society approach toward the issue of migration. I think he said that, and that's very useful. And whole society approach should not only relate to just immigration agency and these other, let's say, NAPTIP, IOM, ICMPD. It should also relate to what is coming out of the police agencies and the intelligence agencies. Because right now we have a big problem of terrorism in this country. Now, one of the clearly stated goals of this new initiative, the e-registration, is to combat insecurity. Now, another goal of this e-registration is national development. Now, those two are antithetical, because if you have insecurity, you cannot really have good national development going on at the same time. So to achieve those two goals, we have to be, we'll have to kind of put it together. Now, what is my evidence? I think the question that is being asked here is, what is the evidence that it is foreigners that are coming in, at least for the most part? Well, look, I just concluded a big study recently from some granting agency, and we were looking at the, well, first of all, we looked at the Sahelian crisis. That's the terrorism and human trafficking, weapons trafficking going on in that whole Sahelian zone. Now, we also look at the growing jihad that is coming out of Mali into Burkina Faso, into Niger, and then on a downward trend into Nigeria. Now, we looked at the issue of cattle rustling also. So how do I know this? Because a lot of people who have been arrested, some of them can't even speak English. They only speak French, or they speak some other strange African language. And so, no, it's not correct. In my business, in the security business, we do profiling. We do what we call predictive profiling. We have to look at a population, a segment of the population of arrests made. This is from cost effectiveness analysis. We look at what are the arrests that are being made, and what is the information that is coming out. That's what, after all, CGI is doing with this new policy, and even the MIDAS from IOM. That's what they are doing. They are gathering information. For what purpose? To gain knowledge out of it. It's not just gathering information for its own sake. It's to gain knowledge. Know the kind of people who are involved in these kinds of activities, and know how to handle them as a group. It's a sociological matter. And that's really the issue here. So the evidence is that a lot of, we know the trends that have been happening. I've been studying this longitudinal study. I've been studying it for over 10 years. We know the trends that have been occurring. We know what has even happened with our Boko Haram on the northeast, the links from Niger, from Mali, and then now with the Sahelian crisis, with Mujao, with Amirabitum, with all those crazies, and the kind of attacks they've been. Look at Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso is almost on fire right now because of jihadi movements in that country, and that jihadi movement is on the downward march, and it's already in Nigeria, but we need to confront it. That's why we need Mr. Babande's agency to really help secure that front line and keep Nigeria safe.
All right, Dr. Anaya Homo, thank you very much, gentlemen, as well. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we have some tweets. We'll take those tweets, and then we'll get back to our guests.
Move now! The red light won't kill you. Move now!
To dey disobey traffic law, they cause accidents. Me, I don't talk, say I no go dey do am again, because change begins with me.
Let's cross the other side of the road.
I will no longer endanger my life crossing the express. Instead, I will use the bridge, because change begins with me.
Oga driver, stop this bus now, won't come down. I be one carry me pass where they go.
Make I dey stop anyhow for road, they cause traffic wahala and accidents. So I go dey stop for the right bus stop, because change begins with me.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Nigeria. We'll be discussing on e-registration of immigrants and expatriate quota abuse. In-depth discussion, raising a lot of awareness and letting people know what to do and where to go to get resident permit here in Nigeria. We have some tweets here, and the first tweet is from Mose. He says, Nigeria must control immigrants. I like the idea by the immigration boss. FG must support the idea. The insecurity in Nigeria is becoming unbearable.
Now, Chris Simeon has this tweet. This is a critical time, and the federal government should know who they register.
And Ikeju Olagbuju tweets, it is important to reform businesses and trade permits to specialized areas where we do not have adequate operational skills. Granting business permit for a foreigner to sell clothes is not acceptable.
Now, this is coming from Billy Jack Solomon. Take it or leave it, the uncontrolled influx of unqualified expatriates and their placement on expatriate quota slots for which there are adequate local manpower resources have contributed greatly to the rising unemployment figures in Nigeria. Only in Nigeria, foreigners are bosses and citizens are servants.
And Dr. Solomon Asalu tweets, though nothing is impossible in this life, but I doubt how registration of immigrants can be realized when we don't even have accurate data of those who are really Nigerians. Besides, how do we identify a Ghanaian in Nigeria who speaks English and some Nigerian local languages?
Ibrahim Tudu, now we come in contact, that's according to him, we come in contact with many expatriates and immigrants in Nigeria on employment or who are self-employed, married, who are investors, they are settlers and other categories of migrants. Most of them don't have means of identification. In fact, they sometimes present Nigerian ID cards. Why?
And our regular first Stews Akimboyewa tweets, registration of immigrants in Nigeria is good, but there are legitimate moral questions around registration of those who have lived in Nigeria for many years and have made positive contribution to our development. FG should tell us what will happen to those who fail to register.
Law Alpha C, registration of immigrants without thorough investigation of the true originality and purpose of immigration will only lead Nigeria into more problems, especially now that insecurity is rife.
Obama Bo White tweets, please can the controller explain why the fees advised for passport has been 20,000 for 5 years, and yet when you go to the passport office they insist on you paying 35,000 in almost all the states of the Federation. Again, with just 5,000 naira bribe, miscreants find their way into Nigeria.
Now, Musa Hadeja tweets, Nigerians should give maximum support to officers responsible for the exercise. That's to say, especially the traditional rulers in rural areas, by reporting new faces for easy identification, registration, or repatriation if necessary.
And A. Modibo tweets, as the largest economy in Africa and the major business hub in West Africa, Nigeria has huge inward foreign investment, which comes with the attendant immigration issues surrounding employment of expatriates. In this regard, there has been a lot of negative publicity on the management of migrants in Nigeria over the years, with some people alleging laxity in controlling the influx of migrants into Nigeria. Again, our border managers should think the safety of the country first and shun corrupt practices. I think those
are the tweets that we have. Yeah. I know that the IOM chief of mission has been itching to respond earlier, Franz Celestine, so let's get your thoughts.
Yes, so there are a number of points that my colleagues here have brought up that I wanted to talk about. And I agree with Matthias that we should not criminalize migration, because there are a lot of cases where, and it happens in many different countries around the world, where whenever something happens, migrants are the first one to point to. And the fact is, and when you look at the data, that is not the case. We have actually flow monitoring points across West Africa. IOM has the displacement tracking matrix. We actually have a pretty good understanding on who's moving and where. And this is why I have to back up Matthias from what he said before. 90% of those who migrate, the West African citizens who decide to migrate, they do so within the West African space. And that's because of the 1979 protocol. And I have to point out what CGI said. There's the principle of reciprocity. And I love the fact that he's thinking of, okay, whatever I do here may be done to Nigerians abroad. And this is why I think the CGI is such a brilliant person. He is looking at what can happen to a Nigerian in the far-flung corners of the world if I do something to somebody here. The principle of reciprocity is real within the international system. And so as policymakers, we need to think of what will happen if we do something here. There is they said for every action there's a reaction, and it's like a balloon. You squeeze here, something will inflate here. Having visionaries like Mr. Babanderi thinking beyond just the borders of Nigeria is quite important. And looking at what we do as IOM, and this is why bringing our global practice together is important. I can tell you this, like the people that are moving across Nigeria, we have flow monitoring points in Katsina, we have flow monitoring points in Kano. We know on average how many people are moving. There are some cases where we were finding like 600 people crossing going outside of the country per day in Kano, 625. So the data is there. Those who are moving within the ECOWAS space is important. And then the ECOWAS 79 protocol provide that the ECOWAS citizens the space to move. Now, having the necessary data to manage that, and this is where the e-registration is important. And this is why the amnesty from His Excellency is important, Mr. President, is that it allows the Nigerian Immigration Service to have a proper account of who's here. Even if you don't get everybody who's here irregularly registered, but that's better than zero. And I've seen it in action. We were there on the 12th. I see how it works. And we have worked with the Nigerian Immigration Service to test it. It was not just here, but it was also, I believe, it was tested in Calabar. But the immigration, NIS has 42 such points throughout the country where people can go and register. It will give a proper look. And like the CGI said, Nigeria will soon be the third largest country in the world. And there are quite a number of Nigerians migrating outside of the country. We need to think about them. We need to make sure, like, if something is happening to them and we speak up, they don't call us hypocrites.
Well, that's right. Francis Celestine, thank you very much. But tie all of this by way of response to the points also articulated by Dr. Onai Homo in our Lagos network studios. Nigeria, before now, had little qualms about people moving across borders. I mean, there was always the sense of artificiality of our borders arising from the 1884 to 1885 Berlin Conference, which balkanized the African continent, and so on and so forth. But as Onai Homo has explained, you have something like a molten lava, you know, flowing from other parts of West Africa into Nigeria, and it recognizes the crucial role of immigration in building the dike, as it were, or ensuring that we have proper border security. From the IOM point of view, in terms also of profiling and therefore helping the country's security, now this is very crucial. What is it that is required to be done in terms of, look, if skilled persons want to come in, let them come. Harmless persons want to come in, I'm sure Nigerians will say you are welcome. But when you have the danger, as I said, molten lava, you know what that means.
Right,
you know?
of course.
So,
no, but a good point. And I think that's what all of the security services are there for. And the NIS as a frontline agency has that burden of you know, providing that the security for the country. I mean, with a workforce, and I tend to be corrected by the CGI, of 26,000 people, that is a formidable force that is being put in place. Now, let's look at the progress that have been made by NIS and working with IOM, and let's look at the specific you know, issues. For example, the border strategy, which NIS recently put in place. This is the guidepost that all NIS officials would use to protect the border, because that it plugs into an umbrella that you know the Nigerian government creates, so that all of the agencies, the concerned agencies, can plug into, with NIS leading this conversation. So, looking at security concern, of course, as IOM, we don't want to see the bad guys come in. We want to work with all of the Nigerian MDAs, and especially our primary partner, the NIS, to make sure that these bad guys stay out of the country. We want to make migration for the benefit of all. And you cannot, but migration cannot benefit people if those who have nefarious intention are coming in. This is why we have MIDES. This is why NIS has all the different products, the technology that they're putting in place. And the foreigners registration is one key aspect of it. And the mobile MIDES also will give the NIS the necessary tool to track and get those who are coming and trying to come irregularly. So that, again, going back to my whole of society approach and whole of government approach, requires everybody to input. And this is why I like the tweet from one of the viewers here saying, let's get the traditional leaders involved. Let's get the local population involved. If somebody is coming and that person is not coming from the proper, okay, let's work with them. Churches, mosques, everybody. That's why it's a whole of society approach.
All right. Thank you very much, Franz Celestine. Just the last set of tweets that we'll be taking on this occasion, we'll go through them very quickly. Ozode Chukwuebuka, all immigrants entering Nigeria must be profiled and duly registered. We must not leave our borders unchecked.
And Josephat Ukati tweets, is there any stiff penalty for those immigrants that fail to register? If there is, what are these penalties?
Now, Ibrahim Tudu tweets, two tweets, I'll take one of them and Jumel will take the other. Comptroller General of Immigration, now this e-registration is not well known to the public. Almost nothing is happening at the border towns and states. Your agency must collaborate with CSOs and communities to pass information. You can't do this work silently. Immigration is now tied to insecurity in the country. The borders are at the center of the issue and the immigration service at the center of it all. They must sit up.
And Ibrahim Tudu still tweets, if the U.S. is struggling with borders, migrants and drug trafficking, we can't just be playing good Samaritans and Democrats in Nigeria with our borders looked by. Our borders should have been closed temporarily for the registration.
All right. We'll get the closing thoughts from Dr. Onoye Ekhomo and then return to the Comptroller General of Immigration. Dr. Onoye Ekhomo, your perspective, just before we call it today, on the program today, in terms of the security implications and what we need to get right, data capture, ID management, for purposes of controlling crimes, whether of immigrants or locals.
Thank you very much, sir. I think the most important thing here is to ensure that we are able to register enough people to make this data worthwhile, such that we are not relying on anecdotal data. Like the CGI said, we don't have the population of migrants, whether legal or illegal migrants in the country right now. And that is troubling. So we need to get that kind of information. So what are the things that can challenge this system and what will happen? Well, first of all, we'll have to ensure that we have good information, protection of information assets. That's good computer security with it. We'll have to ensure that you know, there are no unethical or sharp practices going on, you know, at the registration points. And then the most important thing is we have to prove the identity of the registrants. Those people coming to register, they must prove the identity, because you can't just come and say, oh, I'm a Nigerian, register me. It could be a fake out. Maybe the guy is from Mali or from somewhere else and probably has you know, some kind of sinister motive. So I think this thing about proof of identity is also important in immigration enforcement within this country here, within our own national borders. Because at some point on 12th of January 2020, this program will flux, it will elapse. Now, what happens thereafter? I expect that immigration personnel will go and get people to prove their identities in order to say who they really are and whether they are registered or not or what have you. But I think there are challenges here and we need to look at cost effectiveness measures such that this program will achieve the goal, policy goals for which it's designed.
All right, Dr. Enoy, thanks. Very quickly, CGI, let's get your closing thoughts and response to some of the issues that have been raised by the other guests, plus the tweets.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to say that registration will continue after the expiry of the amnesty. The amnesty only allow people to register without penalty. So after the expiry of the registration in January 2020, the amnesty registration will continue throughout. Anybody who enters Nigeria after 90 days will continue to register. We will engage. I like to commend all the tweets and the comments from Dr. that we will continue to engage civil society. We want to even include and talk to governors, traditional rulers, so that they can buy in this project. I entirely agree with you that a safe border is a safe nation, and that what we do also affects security. That's why in our border policy we target three things. That a border management are three things: national security. Second, commerce is a route for commerce interaction, and also human rights issues. So people should not see a militarized border issues with the guns, and we want people to trade because we are brothers to one another. But we are not going to build walls across our borders. Walls cannot solve the problem. We'll continue to respect human rights. We'll continue to do the right thing. And thanks for the tweet about corruption. We are doing our best. That's why Mr. President, when he approved the passport reform, he said, you must fight corruption. That's why we opened a passport processing center as a model where you can enter and pay nothing. Pay the fees only.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Comptroller General, Nigeria Immigration Service, Mohammed Babadede. It's been a pleasure having an in-depth discussion with you on this topic. We also thank the Nigerian Chief of Mission International Office of Migration, Franz Celestin. Thank you so much for your input. And Matthias Asene, Head, West Africa International Center for Migration Policy and Development. It's been a pleasure.
I'm not the head, I'm the National Project Officer.
Okay, National Project Officer. And Mr. Ona Ekyomo, a security expert from Lagos. Thank you so much for your contribution on Good Morning Nigeria today. Kingsley?
All right, of course, that does it for us on the program. Of course, that does it for us on the program today. We'd like to thank you for tuning in. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do enjoy the rest of your day. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Juma Yusuf. Thanks so much for spending your morning with us.